Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about all that is in God. Tim and I, which this is Tim, if you didn't know that. Tim and I read a book every month together, and then we get together and talk about it, and we thought it would be a good idea to let you watch us make fun of each other for a couple hours or an hour or whatever. And at the same time, you'll get to hear what we think about the book, thoughts from it. Normally how this goes is as we read the book, we make notes in the text and then another note in the back of the book. And if you've seen any of the books before, this is what it looks like. Come on. There we go. And so what we'll do is we go through the list of notes that we've made, and we could end up talking about whether or not the landing on the moon was real or fake. We could end up talking about parenting, church life. The conversation always sort of evolves organically. Or maybe we'll just talk about the book for once the whole time, I guess. So,
Rarely.
before we started, we both sort of, I'll ask Tim, Tim, what did you think about this book?
It was very heady. There's a lot to it.
And
hard to understand.
Which was unexpected because we both like James Dolezal as a teacher. We listen to his sermons. I don't disagree with anything that I can think of in the book, but I didn't enjoy the book as much as I thought I would. I was really excited about the book. Did I make you excited about it by being excited about it?
Yep.
And then probably you had listened to Dolezal's sermons before,
Yeah.
so
We both like him.
yeah, I think we were both excited, but nevertheless, we do have some notes to go over, I guess. So what we do when we go through the notes is we just go in order that we made the notes. Tim made like 4 notes. 5, which makes me doubt that he read the book. So
Let's not talk about that.
maybe he didn't read the book. But I've got 11, which is way less than we normally have. But my first one is on Roman numeral number 15. And what is your first one?
20.
Okay, so I go first. So this, all the notes have headings with them. So if you've got Dolezal's book, if you pause the video, go grab Dolezal's book, sit down, you can sort of look at it with us. That's a cool idea that I never thought of until just now, that if you've got the book, you could do it. Let's see. Okay, Roman numeral number 15. This is where I really hope.
But if you have a different type of book that's the same book.
You mean a different All That Is in God book?
Yeah, like not a different book, but a different, printing of it.
Oh, sure. I don't think there is any other printings of it. That's a valid point. Like a different edition of it.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. So this obviously is the book. I do think this is the only edition of it. Yeah, by Reformation Heritage Books. And so this is Roman numeral number 15. I've got 2 things on it. The heading for it is biblical. Oh, this will be good. Biblical versus systematic theology and methodology in theology proper. Okay, so in the first actual paragraph, not the partial paragraph, in the first partial paragraph on the page, sort of in the middle, it starts with, I readily affirm. It's right here. That's where I'm at. Okay. So this is, remember, biblical theology, systematic theology, and methodology in theology proper. Okay, he says, I readily affirm that biblical theology has been a profound catalyst for improving and enriching our understanding in the progress of redemption. But it seems to me that biblical theology, with its unique focus on historical development and progress, is not best suited for the study of theology proper. The reason for this is because God is not a historical individual. Neither does his intrinsic activity undergo development or change. This places God beyond the proper focus of biblical theology. God is not changed by what he does, though he does certainly though what he does certainly brings about progress in history, creatures, and salvation. I'll stop there, but it took me a long time to figure out that. Well, let me ask you, if I said to you, what is biblical theology, what would you say?
A theology by the Bible?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I thought. For the longest time, biblical theology was like, as opposed to what? Unbiblical theology? Or like you said, a study of the Bible, which would be like bibliology or whatever. Mm-hmm. And what he's talking about here is biblical theology as opposed to systematic theology, which is biblical theology looks at how God revealed himself through time. So like, how did he reveal himself in Genesis, Exodus, all the progress through the covenants, the incarnation, and then the epistles of Paul and the Revelation. And it sort of like looks at how God revealed himself through time and maybe how progress was made in that. So like maybe, obviously, this would be an example. In Genesis 1 and 2, God isn't revealed as Savior, let's say. Mm-hmm. But in Genesis 3, we see him promise a Savior. Whereas systematic theology would look at the whole Bible and all of the revelation that God has given, and then it'll make propositional statements about who God is. So it's the purview or the scope of biblical theology to look at how God revealed himself progressively through time, through revelation. And it's the purview of systematic theology to take that whole revelation and sort of organize it into headings and whatnot, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so now here, Dolezal is arguing biblical theology, since it deals with how God revealed himself through time, isn't best suited as the method to use when developing a theology of God, because God doesn't develop through time, even though his revelation does. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm sort of like, feel like I'm circling around the point that I'm trying to make.
it is still a little bit like kind of confusing, but I'm getting it.
Yeah. The point is basically that like biblical theology, whenever you hear it, you have to think of God's progressive revelation. Don't think, as opposed to unbiblical theology. Nah. You know, but yeah, that's something that took me a while to figure out. My quote continues. I actually have it marked after where we stopped, where it says creatures and salvation. Mm-hmm. Keep reading. It says, in an attempt to understand God as one of the historical characters in the narrative of redemption, many have fallen into the trap of historicizing his very life and existence. Suffice it to say, while biblical theology tells us many true things about God, its proper focus on development and progress is not methodologically suitable to the study of the one who does not change. Now, does that probably makes a lot more sense than it would have before I went into, the differences and whatnot. Okay, keep reading. The contemplative approach to theology proper treats God as an ahistorical being and seeks to discover the timeless truths about him by thinking through the implications and entailments of those things he has revealed to us in creation and Scripture. And this certainly includes those things revealed about God in the unfolding course of redemptive history. I think why I marked this is because I saw it as a part of the book where Dolezal was like, this is why I approached the study of theology proper this way, and why I think it's the best way, rather than picking up and looking at through the lens of biblical theology, which is like, it's not that like biblical theology is bad. It's like a different tool in our toolbox of understanding.
Yes.
Where Dolezal is like, rather than looking at God as a character in this revelation through time, we look at him as an ahistorical being. That makes most sense through the lens of systematic theology. So, that was my first one. Oh, Tim, when was your next one? You said
just one.
it was like page 37, wasn't it? Or mine's 11. I have one on 11 if you want to go there.
How many do you have?
Well, then I have 16. And then I actually do have
I have an
37.
X on the page, and I don't know why.
Maybe
Said
that's your
11?
favorite? Yes. Oh yeah, I know where I'm going.
Chapter 1, my favorite. Chapter 2, my head's melted.
My favorite chapter was the first one because I understood like the first few sentences of it. It was really great. Okay. On 11, the heading is having no beginning, he never begins. Okay, so there you go. Having no beginning, he never begins. That's very okay. Page 11.
Does that confuse you?
Yeah, I'm confused already. Okay. In the middle of this paragraph, where it says God is of himself, it's like starting a quote. Oh, it's a quote from Stephen Charnock.
Okay.
In the middle of this paragraph on divine aseity and pure actuality.
Okay, I got it. God
Okay.
is of himself.
Yeah, I'll start just so we can get the context of the Puritan. The English Puritan, Stephen Charnock, makes a similar point regarding aseity. God is of himself, from no other. God hath no original. He hath no defect, because he was not made. Hold on. I can't handle it. Hold on. God hath no original. He hath no defect, because he was not made of nothing. He hath no increase, because he had no beginning. He was before all things, and therefore depends upon no other thing. And then this is back to Dolezal. That which has no beginning cannot begin to be in any respect. So since God had no beginning, and his being is totally of himself, self-sufficient, self-existent, or whatever, however you want to say it, because he possesses this of himselfness, he has no beginning, and if he has no beginning, he can't begin to be anything along the way either, or else it wouldn't be true that he had no beginning. Like,
oh, okay.
If he could begin to be something, well then at least a part of him had a beginning.
Yeah.
Or, yeah. This is then referring to, well, the chapter is on the unchanging God, and it's just making an argument. Which Charnock, by the way, put this in your memory pocket. Charnock is like the Puritan everyone likes to quote on God's attributes. So,
I didn't know that.
Yep. Stephen Charnock, most well known for his treatises on God's attributes. That which has no beginning cannot begin to be in any respect.
That makes sense. I can see it.
I feel like if I dwelt more on it, I would just get it. I would just screw it up.
You'd make it more confusing.
Yes. It's a 12-word sentence. It's good enough.
Can you give me the heading you had?
Yeah, page 11. Having no beginning, he never begins.
That makes a lot more sense now than it did before when you said it.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Having no beginning,
he never begins.
Yep.
My next one's on page, I don't know, 16 or 17?
Yeah, I think you said 16. I like that we're doing this because you get all the pressure, not me.
What, that I have the pressure to be smart and perform smart feats of understanding?
Sort of, yeah. I'm just saying I can be cool as a cucumber because you're beet red.
Oh yeah? Well, guess what? You've got a note on page 20 coming up. We'll just wait.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I guess I should.
Thanks a lot.
Hey, look, I got something on 17.
Okay, good. Well, mine's on 16. God has full being and no non-being. God has full being and no non-being. Okay, page 16. And it's after the quote, just starting after that quote. It starts with that which is pure act.
Okay, got it.
That which is pure act is dynamic and utterly full of being and life. Thus, it is entirely self-sufficient and independent of all others. John Owen picks up the same theme of God's pure actuality when he speaks of God's perfect and infinite fullness of being as the one in whom there is no principle of non-being. That is, no passive potency. And this is where, like, listening to Dolezal's sermons prepared me to understand what he means by that. Which, passive potency, do you know what that is? Okay, so passive potency would be like a potential that rests in God that is not utilized.
Okay.
So it's something in him that's not active, but could be active. And so here Dolezal's saying there's nothing in God that can activate then to make God be something that he's not at that moment.
Yeah, okay.
There's nothing, and so that's a passive potency. Potency, I guess, meaning like power or ability.
Okay.
There's nothing, and here's why that's significant. Because if we did affirm passive potency, we would have to affirm that God could change from one state of being to another state of being.
Yeah.
To a state of some sort of inactivity, to a state of some kind of activity or whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think, actually, he deals with this in chapter 5, where then he affirms God to be the eternal creator. That even though creation is an act of temporality, that he would still deny, like, that a change in God's being occurred. And so he affirms God as eternal creator, even though creation itself is not something that's eternal.
Okay.
Yeah. Tim, you got brain on your shirt. Oh, that's funny. Okay. Your turn, homie.
I said I had something on 17. I have markings on it.
Yeah?
But I think that's just so that it helps me understand the next time I read it.
Sure.
So I have I have divine immutability as unchanging.
Right.
And I think that's because when I first came up to the divine immutability, I was confused as to why it was what divine immutability meant.
Oh, okay.
And so to help me to understand and remember for the next time I read this book, if I ever read this book again, I would understand it better.
Yeah, and that comes from the term, like, mutation.
That makes sense.
So, like, a mutation is something that can change, and it's something that's immutable. Yeah, it
cannot change. Yeah,
and also it can't be silenced. I just made that up. Where do they say that? It's immutable. Okay, yeah. Yeah, it means like mutation as in change, which is why it means like cannot change.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
Next one's not till 20.
Yeah, I'm there.
Oh, that's why it's my turn.
Yeah,
okay.
It is. And then I'm on 37, so.
Oh, what do you know? I don't got anything. You're going to have to go again. Just kidding.
Fair enough.
Okay, so it's on chapter 20, or page 20. And it's, the heading I have for it is where I found I was accidentally. I'm sort of confused now, so
yeah,
we'll see what it says.
Yep. Wait, did you say where I found I was accidentally?
Yeah.
Okay.
This will be interesting. This is where you get to feel superior.
That's such a new feeling. I wonder what that's going to feel like.
It's the beginning of the second partial paragraph. So it says those who subscribe to the softer.
okay.
And here we go. Mm-hmm. Those who subscribe to the softer version of theistic mutualism are usually willing to deny that the Bible speaks literally or properly of God when it speaks of him possessing body parts. Okay, let me continue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Moving about locomotively in space, or even changing his mind. But when the Bible speaks of God as experiencing changes of relation, affection, or agency, we are told that these changes are properly made in God and that the text would be meaningless or even untrue if this were not so. That's where I stop. I can keep going if it doesn't make enough sense.
No, I totally get it. He's saying everyone reads the Bible and it said God has hand, eyes, heart, bowels, arm, whatever. It says all these things about God. And even the most, maybe not the most, yeah, even the most theologically liberal folks say no. That's anthropomorphic language used about God to help us understand true things about God, but not that God has a cardiovascular system which pumps blood to limbs that are connected with tendons and ligaments that he uses muscles to move. And
like when he says his hand was upon them or something like that.
Yeah.
It's not actually meaning a literal hand.
Yep. And it's saying, and Dolezal's saying, even, the most far out people will believe when the Bible uses that language that it's not literal. And then he goes on to say, or passages that talk about God moving in space, or passages that speak of God changing his mind. Although some people would probably affirm, no, God really does change his mind. But most people would understand that that's meant to describe God's actions, not necessarily his change from one state of being to another state of being. But the whole crux of this argument is Dolezal is pointing out the fact that we understand that God doesn't have body, he doesn't have body that moves in space, that God doesn't have a mind that experiences an increase of knowledge, which really some people do believe that, and they're called open theists.
Oh, okay.
So if you hear that term, an open theist is basically, I'll try to say it as they would probably say it of themselves, but they believe that like God doesn't know the future and sort of like discovers it as with you or whatever.
Okay.
Maybe even that he's all powerful, and maybe that he's sovereign over it all, but that he still doesn't know it until after it happens.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so that's open theism. They would probably say then that God can change his mental state of being. Anyway, Dolezal's whole point to this is, why is it then when people get to these scriptures which talk of God's emotions, they forget all the other things that they just affirmed or whatever?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So all the people that would deny that God has body parts and passions are coming up to passages where it talks about his emotions, and they're talking about that as if it were the same thing as like body parts.
That it's almost like they forget, like that they were willing to say, yes, God, passages about God's hand and arm and eyes are meant to be taken anthropomorphically, not necessarily literally.
Yeah.
But yeah, that when we get to his emotions, that all of a sudden those are meant to be taken literally.
Yeah.
That God has literal emotional changes from once, and this is why it's significant to deny that, is because then God changes from one state of being to another state of being.
Yeah.
Where something was inactive in him, maybe like, let's say, anger against sin. So we got passages that speak about God's anger burning against sin. Does that mean prior to that it didn't burn for sin?
Yeah.
Maybe for a little while? Because if we've got an anger for sin that's not active in God, now we've got passive potency, right? Now there's something in God that's not fully active. When passage speaks of God's anger burning against sin, well, that doesn't mean 10 days ago he was like, you know what, sin's not so bad.
Yeah.
But for some reason, when those passages speak of God's anger or his love or whatever, people want to take those literally. And he's saying, just like God doesn't have man, God in his essence doesn't have man parts, as in body parts, neither does he have man's emotions.
I don't know why, but it is easy to forget. Like, I
Yeah, sure.
find myself doing that.
Sure. Mm-hmm. And this is of actual practical importance for Christians, because we go through life thinking that God is sort of like happy with me, sad, or with me, mad at me, happy with me, sad with me. Like,
Yeah.
because I'm happy and sad with myself is really what's going on.
Yeah.
When God, in Christ, God is always 100% for us, and he's always 100% hating sin, but always 100% for those in Christ, or for those joined to his Son.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so so people think, or like even you and I can get lost in the discussion where we're like, passive potency, emotions in God, what does all of it matter, or whatever, and then you realize like, oh yeah, well yesterday I was like, God is frowning on me right now, or whatever, or that he's less, or that he loves me less, or whatever, is really the practical part of it. But I'm curious, your note you're heading for it makes no sense whatsoever.
Not really, other than I found myself in that position at one time where, like, at one time I would believe that, and it was accident, like I didn't actually think and decide that God had body parts, but like reading it, I accidentally just found myself believing it.
Sure.
So I guess that's the only reason I can think of as to why I said where I found I was accidentally.
Oh, okay. So like, and reading it, it just reminded you like, oh yeah, I do that accidentally.
Yeah.
I just sort of coast into thinking that, really coast into thinking wrong thoughts about God based upon God's word, which is sort of a scary thing, really. Because you're like searching God's word, reading God's word, and then coming to wrong conclusions based on the right things, which is like, that's what the scribes and Pharisees did, right?
Yeah.
They've got truth staring them in the face, and they're like, come to all the wrong conclusions.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just me calling you a Pharisee. Sit on that for a while. I'm going to take a drink.
I'm going to take a drink.
My next one's on...
I'll deal with this later off camera.
On 37. I'm so scared. Tim, you might not know this, and you might not have been able to tell yet, but he's deceptively capable because he grew up on a farm.
Yeah, that's pretty much the only reason why.
So, and I grew up. We won't talk about it.
Trailer parks.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Page 37. What is your next one?
My next one's on 37 too.
Oh, that's really cool.
That's pretty neat. We do this every now and then where we'll be on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not exactly in the same spot, but that's when it gets good.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's hilarious when like you'll have a note on a page and then my note will start when yours ended.
Yeah.
It's like, I thought this part was great. Oh yeah? Well, you stopped right when I thought it was going to be awesome. Mine's the first paragraph.
Hey, mine is too.
All right, this must be good.
Okay, what's your heading?
Oh, this is good. Okay. Mine is Theology Under Construction.
Theologies and builders.
Theologies
/builders.
and builders. Yeah. Yeah, so we've got the same picture in our heads.
So I'll let you read it or I can read it. It's up to you.
Yeah, I'm voting you because I've got 17 more notes than you. So
I'll do it.
You read it. Hold on. So I also have...
I noticed that.
Oh, okay. So In my chapter 3 for Simple God, because he's going to go into the doctrine of divine simplicity, and I have claims and implications start on page 40. The biblical support for the doctrine is on page 44, and then the historical witness, looking at all the other people who have affirmed the doctrine of divine simplicity, starts on page 50.
Oh, so it's to help you or whoever else reads you the book.
Yeah. If I ever get to a point where I'm like, what was divine simplicity again? Does that mean that theology is easy? It's funny because you come to Dolezal talks about this too. You come to the doctrine of divine simplicity and it's like, okay, it's time for divine simplicity. And it's not easy.
No.
I think he even mentions like when he writes his, when he chose to write on it for some sort of thesis in college or whatever, which is like some fancy college paper that people write or whatever, that he chose divine simplicity, and somebody's like, why'd you choose that? Yeah. Because it sounded easy. I mean, it's not.
Oh, that's funny. He just wanted to outshine everybody else.
Yep. It's funny.
Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the course of church history, theologians have sought to coherently communicate both the explicit teachings of Scripture and the doctrines that emerge as a necessary consequence of what the Bible as a whole teaches. These truths, rightly ordered, form an internally consistent system of Christian doctrine. We might liken the work of the theologian to that of a builder, who first gathers materials for the construction of a building and then proceeds to erect the structure. Some of the materials are easily collected, while others are obtained with much difficulty. But the work is not finished when one has gathered the various resources. There remains the difficult job of arranging them in their proper order so that the building holds itself together. The task of theology proper is similar. After gathering the various truths about God that are spread throughout nature and Scripture, one is faced with the challenge of intelligibly arranging the doctrines so as to form a single coherent doctrine of God.
Yeah. And one of the things that comes to my mind is what we were saying before about God saying, I've stretched out my arm to you all day long, or whatever. And then other parts where it says, like, God is not a man. Or Jesus when he says, God is a spirit. So those scriptures and the thoughts in our minds about those scriptures and what they mean, he's saying we sort of gather them all up and then we go, how can all that be built into an understanding of something that makes sense or whatever?
Yeah. I like how he compared them to builders. I think that's great.
Yeah. One of the things that is really helpful, and I'm reading another book right now by the guy who did the songs for the Baptist Catechism, Oric is his last name, and the book's on Calvinism. And one of the things that book is really good at is it's full of illustrations.
Oh.
So like this thing about a builder, or even in Dolezal's sermons about divine simplicity, and I don't think I saw it mentioned in here at all. But one of the illustrations, you have to tell me if you remember it being in here, but the Lego Man. Do you remember him talking about the Lego Man in the sermon anyway?
In which sermon? Sorry.
On divine simplicity.
I remember talking... Yes! Yep, I remember him talking about the Lego Man. Mm-hmm.
But I don't remember seeing, where's the Lego Man, you know?
Yeah.
No Lego Man.
Where's the Lego Man? Give me the Lego Man!
But the thing with the Lego Man was, the Lego Man is comprised of different parts, and those parts are reliant upon the parts and someone to compose the parts to be a Lego Man. And so since we're on a chapter on divine simplicity, it makes sense to talk about it. But not only... So divine simplicity is an affirmation that God is one and there is no parts in God that make God to be God. If he did, then he would have things simpler than himself and would rely upon someone else to put those parts together to make him what he is. So he would rely then on the parts and on someone to make the parts cohere with one another, snap into each other like the Lego man or whatever. But the Lego man illustration, that's good.
Yeah,
it really helped me understand what he was talking about.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was him or not, but for sure I do remember the Lego man.
Oh yeah, I'm absolutely sure it was him. My next one is page 40. That'd be hilarious if I turned to like a Lego man illustration.
That would be hilarious. I have one on 38.
You're a successful person. Whoa, what is all this? What am I? What? Oh, okay. Never mind, sorry. I was confused.
You're confused.
Hi.
My name's Tim. Welcome back, Confused.
Nice to be here. This is a nice place you've got here.
It's kind of a pigsty, actually.
I'm just kidding. I'm offended.
Or was I kidding?
Honey!
I'm confused now.
What?
Because I have a mark here. Oh, never mind. I'm not confused no more. I got it.
I'm confused.
We're back.
I'm David. Welcome to my pigsty. I knew it. See, he admits it.
Okay, so mine is 38, and it's the title for it, or the heading I have for it, is not science, but incomprehensible.
Not science, but incomprehensible.
Yeah, we'll see why I wrote that, or maybe we will anyway.
We'll see. Well, it'll all make sense. Hopefully.
Oh man. Okay, so I'm the first full paragraph where it starts out saying the goal is not to enable. Okay, here we go. The goal is not to enable us to comprehend God in some scientific sense, or to dispel the mystery of his being. Indeed, classical Christian theism insists upon the absolute incomprehensibility of God throughout the entire formulation. So...
No. Keep reading.
Okay, I'll keep going.
Yeah, go through the next end of the next thing.
Okay. The Puritan Stephen Charnock offers sage counsel when he states, though we cannot comprehend him as he is, we must be careful not to fancy him to be what he is not.
That's so good.
It is good. The Swiss theologian Charles Jornet proposes, by the way, you can correct me if I'm wrong so that
sure
they understand.
No, I was going to say I've never even read that name before, but I read the book.
I really was.
I was like, I've never read that before.
So who didn't read the book now?
That's hilarious.
Okay, so the Swiss theologian Charles Jornet proposes that the aim of theologian dealing with mystery is to do away with phrases which diminish the mystery. Our theological grammar functions in part to preserve the integrity of revealed mystery of God at precisely those points where human reason may be tempted to diminish it in an effort to render God more easily understood by the human intellect. So, he's not science.
Yeah. What I saw in that is really the best in the Charnock quote, where it's like, no matter what you believe about God, make sure you don't affirm things of him that are not true. Like, okay, it's like this. You will never get all the right thoughts of God in your head, right? Everybody will affirm that. God is so big and incomprehensible, that you're never going to get all of him in this whatever 7 inches between your ears, right?
Yeah.
So, knowing that you will never get all of it, you must make sure that what you do get is right.
Yeah.
And so, though we cannot comprehend him as he is, and by that, Charnock means as he is fully.
Oh, okay.
Not that you can't know him at all, but that you can't know him entirely.
Yeah. We can comprehend certain aspects, but we can't, we won't understand him fully.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wouldn't have,
Sure.
I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
Comprehend.
Yeah, comprehend him as he is. It's not saying like, though we can't know God at all, we must make sure we don't know him at all. Like, it's not saying something weird like that. It's saying, though we can't know him as he is, fully, as God, because really, you know what it takes to know God fully and completely? It's not a trick question. It's a genuine question.
Okay.
What does it take to know God fully, completely, 100%, entirely?
I'm not going to be able to answer it.
You'd have to be God.
That makes
right?
sense.
So isn't that interesting? Like, in order to fully comprehend and know God, that ability is reserved to one, namely God.
Yeah. I wanted to say, well, when we get to heaven, but then I was like, maybe we won't.
Yeah, we'll know him. And that's in Dolezal's sermons, again, to reference them, he talks all the time about how, like, we can know God truly, but you won't know him comprehensively. You can apprehend right things of God, like you can see right things about God, but you'll never see everything about God because you're limited.
Yeah.
You have limitations. And it's not only that, and this is another thing that Dolezal points out, it's not only because you're limited and you have a finite measuring stick or whatever with your brain. It's not only that your brain is limited, it's that God has no outer edge that your brain could wrap around.
Yeah.
How about that?
I see something link it out again.
So, like, this is the illustration that I give is you can't wrap your arms around the sun, right? Like, you could try, though. But that's not to say no one could ever wrap their arms around the sun, or that nothing could ever wrap around the sun. Because the sun, even though it's huge and it's the biggest thing in our solar system, it still has a limit to where something could comprehend it. Something could wrap around it, even though we can't wrap around it. But like, with God, there's no like edge to circumnavigate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So like, you can know certain things about God that he's revealed in scripture and in nature. You can know like things about him that are true. But not only is your measuring stick too short, even if you had the longest measuring stick ever, God is greater than that.
Yeah.
It's very all like metaphysics and like, I feel sort of like more of like a philosopher than they probably should at the moment. But I think it all ties back to what Charnock said which is we can know God truly, but we can't know him entirely, so we must make sure that we don't fancy him to be something he's not. We've only got so much we're gonna know about him, so make sure that those parts are correct. Mm-hmm. And don't go saying things about him that aren't accurate or whatever.
Yeah.
That was good. That was a good part. I like that. I cannot believe I did not mark that, because that is That's a glorious quote.
Well, you said it yourself. You didn't read it.
That's a glorious quote by Charnock. That's like, that is so super good. I'm going to write that down. No, I don't want your heading. I'm sorry. I don't mean to insult you.
Except I do.
Yeah, I do, actually.
It's quite alright.
Charnock.
It's quite alright.
And this is, I think I'm just going to call it Fancy Him to Be What He Is Not.
Oh, yeah. Well, I didn't even have Charnock's quote
I just...
marked, so...
It's hilarious. That's exactly what we were just talking about when I was like, when one of us will have something starting right when the other one ended or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, Tim, don't stop there. This next part is awesome.
You got the first part. You must have been so excited about it, you missed the next one.
Yeah, that, I feel like I'm going to fall off my chair. That Charnock quote is great. Okay.
My next one is until 60. 40.
Sorry, did that seem a little eager? I'm sorry. Page 40. And then after that, it's page 58. And then after that, it's your turn.
Okay, well, at least it's only 2.
So this is page 40. You ready? I'm a poet. Simplicity, simply stated.
Good job.
Okay.
I was trying to make sure that I wasn't ruining anything.
Yeah, you broke it.
Sorry.
40, right? 40 some minutes. Good job, Tim. You're doing good. Could be doing better.
I think everyone would admit to that.
Everyone's at home like, all 3 of you. Yeah, you could.
Hold on.
Simplicity, simply stated. I've got 2 things on here. They must... Oh, interesting. Okay, underneath basic claims and implications of divine simplicity. And it's just that paragraph right there, the principal claim. The principal claim. And I'm going to read the whole paragraph. It says, the principal claim of divine simplicity is that God is not composed of parts. Whatever is composed of parts depends upon its parts in order to be as it is. A part is anything in a subject that is less than the whole and without which the subject would be really different than it is. So actually a real difference. In short, composite beings need their parts in order to exist as they do. So like you need a head and a heart and, it'd be easy to be like arm, but you don't need an arm, right? But you do need like a functioning hormone system. You need blood. So a part is anything that you really need to be what you actually are. In short, composite beings need their parts to exist as they do. Moreover, did you pick back up with me where I'm at? Right here. Moreover.
Okay. No, I hadn't picked up.
Sorry.
Okay, I am now.
Moreover, the parts in an integrated whole require a composer distinct from themselves to unify them, an extrinsic source of unity. So this is where, like with the Lego man thing, is so helpful. The Lego man depends upon his little arm part and his head part and his body part and his leg parts and his little hand parts or whatever. And he needs all those parts, but he also needs a composer to put those parts together. So the reason why we have to deny that God has parts is because if he has parts, he would rely upon those parts to be what he is. Not only that, but someone to
put those parts
them together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
To where like first here's a little love, here's a little bit of anger towards sin, here's a little bit of mercy.
Which then would be a beginning for God.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, it really is. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that shows like how related it all gets related back to immutability, which is why even though it's a book on divine simplicity, what you start with is talking about immutability and changeability. Yeah. Okay, keep going. Oh yeah, so that right there would have been a great part for the Lego Man illustration. Like right before he gets into talking about how it applies to God, like right there, just giving the illustration of, I don't know, a car or a Lego Man. Really, the Lego Man's so good because like, the Lego Man can have a definite end where like, you know, you can take an arm off, still Lego Man. Take the legs off, still maybe Lego Man. But eventually, you know, head comes off and it's no more Lego Man. You know, like now you know these are just parts of a Lego Man.
Yeah.
So right there, that would have been a great place for it. Okay. Starting with if God should be composed.
Okay, yeah.
If God should be composed of parts, of components that were prior to him in being, he would be doubly dependent. First on the parts, second on the composer of the parts. But God is absolute in being, alone the sufficient reason for himself and all other things, and so cannot in any respect derive his being from another. Because God cannot depend on what is not God in order to be God. Theologians traditionally insist that all that is in God is God. And that's the bottom line of the book, I guess. That's what he's trying to get across. Really, I think the whole book is to support that. I mean,
all that is in
come
God.
on now, people. It's on the cover. I'm no genius. It's right there. Yeah. Okay. Our next one is 58. It's a shorter one. It's simplicity in all time. Right.
Simplicity in all time?
Yeah, simplicity in all time. I think this is just going to be like, we've always believed it. It's not new. Even though people are talking about it, it's not new. I think that's what the point's going to be.
Okay.
So 58, underneath the end of the quote on the top of the page, so it's the first actual paragraph. It says, the doctrine. Are you there?
Yep, I'm there.
Oh, okay,
sorry. I should have clarified.
I mean, it is pretty obvious what I'm talking about. Right?
Yeah, I forgot that. Sorry, my bad.
The doctrine of divine simplicity is among the most fundamental and widely held dogmas of classical Christian theism. It is clearly central to the collective consciousness of historical Christian thought on God. So he's putting his name to that statement and saying, Christians have historically believed this. It's how we understand God. Now come at me. He's not saying that.
Convince me otherwise.
Yeah, there you go. Sure. That's what a much nicer way to say it. You are free to convince me otherwise, good sir.
Unless I convince you. Okay, can you give me the heading for it again?
Yeah, simplicity in all time. And then I think you're next, E. E.
And 60?
Mm-hmm. What's the next chapter? Because, I mean, your thing is going to be in the next chapter.
Simple God
lost. Oh, yes, this was a good part. I remember this outline from his sermon, which is why I wrote this down too. We either disregard the doctrine of divine simplicity, we sort of ignore it. We deny it, meaning we know about it, and we just say, nope. Or people distort it when they take it and they twist it a little bit.
Yeah.
So those are the three things that are happening with the doctrine of divine simplicity. People are either totally ignorant of it, like us, forever, you know. People are, even though it's in the confession, it's chapter 2, where it says God's without body, parts, or passion. So it's right there, God without parts.
Yeah.
But we either ignore it, or we're antagonistic against it, or we modify ever so slightly to be more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Which is funny, going back to that quote with Charnock and science and looking at God as a science. That sort of gets at what people want to do with simplicity is ever so slightly distort it to make themselves more comfortable with it. To dispel the mystery is what, like, he was arguing.
Oh, okay.
People will maybe distort it a little bit because that's a little bit easier to swallow.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
Like, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I said what I want to say. Don't convince me otherwise.
Okay.
Good, sir.
Good, sir. That's more polite. Good job. Okay, my heading for it is a big heading. That doesn't mean it's going to be great, but it's big.
Whoa. 160, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So my heading for it is cannot talk about God the same way we talk about creatures. And it's in the first partial paragraph. Starts in the first partial paragraph with the temptation is.
Okay.
The temptation is to think that since our speech generally functions this way with respect to creatures, then it must also work this way when we speak of God. But herein lies the difficulty. A simple God is not composed of parts. Thus, his being cannot be directly mapped onto any multi-part statements we make about him. Divine simplicity, accordingly, insists on inescapable incapacity, and inadequacy in all our God talk. We can have only complex proportions and thoughts about a simple God. So is that saying we cannot speak, our words cannot be simple words, because even though he's a simple God.
Yeah. And it really comes fundamentally to when we speak subject and verb. God is XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
But when we say God is XYZ, we're going to be talking about something which could appear to be a part of God.
Yeah.
So if I say God is love, I can talk about it as a distinct attribute, but we could mistake that for meaning that love is a part that's in God.
Oh, okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. That makes sense.
Do you have anything else on that?
Nope, that's it. Do you think I should read more?
No, I just didn't know if there's anything else that popped into your head as a question or something that you liked about it.
I just wondered if... Oh, okay. Sorry. I just wondered if maybe there was how the first part of it.
No.
Nope, that's pretty much all I had about it. It's just that...
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's a hard thing to understand. And if it doesn't make sense coming across, it is because it's difficult to understand. But God is, and he is all that he is, and he is all that he is all the time. And when we speak of certain aspects of God's being, it can be easy, since we are multi-part beings, we live in a multi-part creation, God reveals himself, so to speak, in parts or whatever. We can't. He has to feed us one scoop at a time out of the baby food jar. We can't just walk up to the fire hose of knowledge and go. He's got to be okay, guys, here you go. And we can look at the baby food and be oh, I know about God now because I can see this baby food.
Yeah.
When all he's trying to do is get us to not die. So he's here you go, guys.
Yeah.
And so he's sort of revealing himself to us piece by piece, even though he has no pieces. And we just need to remember that he doesn't have pieces, even though he sort of breaks himself in pieces so that we can see these right things about him.
Mm-hmm.
But not to confuse the fact that when we understand that thing, that's a piece that now we put in the puzzle that is our understanding of who God is or whatever.
Yeah. I'm glad you went further into explaining that. It's clear now.
It is complicated. When he says something like, a simple God is not composed of parts, his being cannot be directly mapped onto, and this is important, his being cannot be directly mapped onto any multi-part statements we make about him. And so Dolezal would affirm we can make true statements about God. We can speak truly about God. We just always have to be careful that we're not mistaking it for the fullness of God when we speak of certain parts of God.
Yeah. Okay.
And not to mistake it for a God that is full of parts when we speak of God in different slivers like love, mercy, justice, truth, wisdom, righteousness, whatever. That's I think a lot of people I've heard people complain about this kind of theology for this reason, because then they say, well, you can't say anything about God then. I mean, if nothing you say directly maps him, then you can't know him at all, because it's going to be inaccurate.
Yeah.
But really, we're just functioning under the limitation of being a creature. There's a hard line between the creature and the creator, and we operate under those limitations.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one for you. What is it? Speak to me. We're on the same team.
70?
You're a buttercup.
Don't know if that's a good thing to be up.
Is this your last one?
Oh yeah, this is my last one.
Okay. I've got 5 more.
Cool. We're getting there. Don't mind me. I'm just gonna. My back is. You can edit that out later if you like.
Sorry, my back is just got my aching back. You're like 70, aren't you? Right?
Yeah, and deceptively other things as well. Deceptively young.
Yeah. I'm 77. You're like Aragorn.
Yeah, very wise too. Wait, Aragorn looks young and he's...
That's what I'm saying, yeah. You're like Aragorn. He's like 80 and he's like... Not 80. Okay.
I wish I was. That would be cool.
I wonder how, really... how did Methuselah look at 577? Right? I mean, how do you look? I don't know. It's weird, right?
Yeah, it'd be interesting because I don't know if, they aged the same way.
Surely not.
Yeah. Because I'm saying, 70 for us looks really old and wrinkly, but, I wonder at 70 if they looked as young as a 16-year-old
I think
something like that.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, there's questions of, where's full maturity? And then, do they just... did they get wrinkly at the end only? And but in the middle, there was just a period of extended maturity where they just maybe looked... I wonder if it'd be I've never put this much thought into it. I wonder, since it is so close, if someone in their 500s would look like someone in their 50s. Right? But at the same time, someone that's 100 is not going to look 10.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
That's true.
But someone that's 100 could look 20.
Yeah.
Maybe. You know what I mean? Because it's not... You can only get so wrinkly.
Yeah.
It's there's got to be a limit, or you're just hunched. And yeah, I don't know. But it is interesting. What do you look like? 503.
This is all speculation, by the way.
What do we get on that for? Because you're deceptively capable and whatever.
My shoulder.
Yeah.
You're messing things up now. Sorry. Okay, 70. And the heading for it is Infinite Perfection, Finite Symbols.
Okay.
It's going to be the first full paragraph, and it's not going to be all of the paragraph.
Okay.
All right. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
As for truly knowing God, analogical revelation no more leaves us without the true knowledge of God than the condescending manner of God's dwelling in the form of Shekinah glory in Solomon's temple. In Solomon's temple left the people of Israel without his true presence. The manner of his revealed presence was there accommodated to the natural perceptive powers of his people. Thus, likewise, is the manner of his revelation in the propositional statements of the Bible accommodated to the cognitive and linguistic powers of humans to whom God speaks. God packages the disclosure of his infinite being under the form of that which is finite in order that his finite creatures may draw near to him. James Henley?
Yep, Henley Thornwell.
Mm-hmm. James Henley Thornwell rightly insists that God's infinite perfections are veiled under finite symbols. It is only the shadow of them that falls upon human understanding. So, God speaks to us in ways that we understand him. Mm-hmm. And that is sort of like the baby food.
Yeah, that came to my mind.
Mm-hmm. Where we can't handle all of it. We can't handle the fire hose. So he gives us baby food.
Yeah, and here he gives the illustration of God wasn't comprehended fully in the Shekinah glory in Solomon's temple. But that doesn't mean he wasn't there.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that he wasn't there truly.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dolezal is making the point, just because a thing doesn't possess all the fullness of God, essentially, doesn't mean that he's going to be totally absent from that expression or whatever.
Yeah. Isn't to say that thing isn't true of him?
Yeah. Just because it doesn't fully comprehend him, just like the Shekinah glory wasn't those perceiving it didn't fully perceive God. That didn't mean that he wasn't fully there.
Mm-hmm.
He was there. Or present. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good illustration. I like that. I don't remember. Never mind. I read that.
Did you read it? Okay, the rest is up to you.
Okay, 79. What is time?
I fell asleep through the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've got the pictures on my phone. Prove it.
I knew it.
Your wife.
My wife sends pictures to his wife about me sleeping.
Actually, to be fair, that hasn't happened in a week or two.
They think it's funny.
Okay, this is...
Oh, wait. I wasn't supposed to say that.
No, it's funny. It's so good. To be fair, my wife has done it, but then I tell her to knock it off nicely. Please, will you please not do that?
I don't have a chance. I'm still sleeping.
Okay. What is time? Page 79, and it starts what is that one big long sentence in where it says he exists.
Starts with he exists.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, got it.
What is time? And then after I read this, I'm going to read the subscript for point number 2.
Sounds good.
He exists, exalted above all time, as creator and Lord, and does not have his life or existence computed and measured out to him in increments of succession. Rather, as his simplicity demands, he is perfectly identical with all that is in himself. Yet the Lord of time both reveals himself and unfolds his sovereign purpose in time. Okay, subpoint 2. Properly considered, time is not an entity or an essence, but is rather a relation between things that change and are liable to change. Time is concreted. Is that what that word is? Time is concreted with all creatures, insofar it is
concreted?
Concreated?
Oh,
okay. Time is concreated, so it is like made together with creatures as they relate to each other, I think is what you say. Time is concreated with creatures insofar as it is the measure and the numbering of all their movement. When we speak of time as a realm, we do not imply that it is like a container or a box in which temporal things exist. Rather, we denote simply the created order which is populated by beings that are subject to and undergo change and thus are measured temporally. So, time is a measure of movement from one state of being to another state of being. I remember that from his sermons as well. So he's saying, really, the first sentence of this is good. He exists exalted above all time as creator and Lord. And listen to, we have our life given to us bit by bit. We experience it moment by moment. My hand is here and now my hand is here. And this life given to me by God is experienced in this succession of moments. However, God is fullness of life and doesn't experience this thing where he goes from one part, where he experiences a change from one state to another, becoming. He doesn't become anything.
Yeah.
So I like this. He exists exalted above all time as creator and Lord, and does not have his life or existence computed or measured out to him in increments of succession. That's a very precise phrase or whatever, but it's just meant to say time don't apply to God.
Yeah. That's good. What did you subtitle it?
What is time? That's all I called it. What is time? And I think it's good because you could probably get a bunch of people to argue for a long time about what time is or whatever. And I had never heard somebody philosophically talk about what time is and what it means for us to be subject to it and what it means for it to... what it means for us to be subject to time and what it means for God not to be subject to time.
Yeah, I didn't read that part.
I don't remember that at all. This is good. I've enjoyed going through this a lot.
Yeah, I find that it's been more helpful for me going through it with you than it has been for me to go through it by myself. That's why this book club is so great.
Yeah, it really is good, and it's good for me too because it makes the wheels go.
Yeah, I really like that he talks about God and time and how it doesn't apply to God, and then I like also that he he then explains what he means by time down here.
Yeah,
I think that's great. I like it a lot. I'm glad that you marked that.
Yeah, that's a good section. Time. Yeah. So we are subject to time. We change. We move. We have being. God doesn't change. God doesn't move. And God is being.
Yeah.
I think that's what Dolezal would say if he were here. Yeah, it's true. So in the book of Acts where Paul's like, in him we live and move and have our being. And God's like, and I am being.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't become. That's so cool. That's one of the things that in trying to understand all this stuff, is understanding God cannot become something he's not. He can't become anything. He is what he is. He cannot become anything else. Because he can't improve. Because was he not perfect before? Or did he have to go through a stage of maturation? Is that why he changed?
Yeah.
So, if we say God becomes something he's not, he's either maturing, in which case he was in a state of not a full perfection, not perfect, or we have to affirm in some other way that he was imperfect and had to purge out an imperfection.
Yeah.
So he can't become something that he's not, which is something from the Dolezal sermons and everything that I remember thinking, yeah, that's helpful. This is all to the good. I like this. This is good. Next one's on 80. Wait a minute. Really? Sure is. Oh, all right. We get a John Owen quote.
Oh, cool. I like John Owen.
Okay. Owen and the mystery of the eternal God. Owen and the mystery of the eternal God. And it's right above the quote. It says the Puritan John Owen. See what I'm saying?
Yes.
The Puritan John Owen rightly recognizes God's eternity as a great mystery. How inconceivable, well, this is Owen now. How inconceivable is this glorious divine property unto the thoughts and minds of men? How weak are the ways and terms whereby they go about to express it? He that says most only signifies... Oh, yeah, sorry, I read that wrong. He that says most only signifies what he knows of what it is not. We are of yesterday, change every moment, and are leaving our station tomorrow. God is still the same, was so before the world was, from eternity. And then he goes, and now I cannot think what I have said, but only have intimated what I adore. So he's like, I don't get it. I don't get it, guys, but it's good. I don't fully understand how this can be, but I'd much rather say that than say something wrong. So he didn't say that, but I'm pointing now back to Charnock, where Charnock's like, you're not going to get all of God into there, but whatever is in there, make sure it's actually what's right. And so Owen's like, I don't really fully get it. And the more I say of it, and he does say this, the more I say about it, the more I'm just saying what it's not.
Yeah.
So that's Owen on the mystery of the eternal God.
It's kind of funny. I had something marked in here, but it doesn't look like it has an end. And I didn't write it down, so I'm guessing it's not a point.
Interesting.
So I wasn't sleeping on that part.
Page 82 is the next part. Do
you think they can hear the train in the background?
Oh yeah, they can, definitely.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Sorry about the train, but there's railroad tracks and trains ride on them. So, okay. This next one is on page 82, and it's God's timeless eternity. And it's the second sentence under meaning of divine eternity, starting with positively.
Got it.
Okay, so what's my heading again? God's timeless eternity. Positively, eternity is derived from the belief that God is so perfect and infinite in being that no new state of being can come upon him, and neither can any state of being slip away from him. He is purely and infinitely actual in all that he is. Boethius, a philosopher and theologian in the 6th century, memorably describes God's eternity as the whole, simultaneous, and perfect possession of boundless life. A bounded life, and that is a life with boundaries, when it says bounded life. A bounded life, or one that has a beginning and end, or one that has a boundary or a limit. A bounded life, by contrast, is one that comes into one's possession little by little, and that which is liable to pass out of one's possession. And then skip to the next page. This is a quote from Francis Turretin. It says, true eternity has been defined by the scholastics to be the interminable possession of life, complete, perfect, and at once. Thus it excludes succession no less than end, and ought to be conceived as a standing, but not a flowing, now. The reason is because nothing flows away with time from the life of God, as from ours. God has every moment at once, whatever we have dividedly by succession of time. Hence philosophers have well said that neither the future nor the past, he will or was, but only the present, he is, can be properly applied to him. For the eternal duration of God embraces indeed all time, the past, present, and future. But nothing in him can be past or future, because his life remains always the same and immutable. That's sort of, this whole part is talking about what we talked about just a little bit ago, about having life given to us little pieces at a time, and how that's not true of God. So all of that was basically the full explanation of that piece, I guess. That's all I've got to say about that. Unless you got any question or something about it.
Could you say again what you meant by it, just so that it's clear in my head?
Yeah. About the time?
Yeah, about what
pieces of it? Oh, okay. So this part right here, the reason is because nothing flows away with time from the life of God as with ours. And that's pointing me back to this first sentence that I read. Positively, eternity is derived from the belief that God is so perfect and infinite in being that no new state of being can come upon him, neither can any state of being slip away from him. So like, he can't enter into any new state of like enlightenment or whatever, anything. He can't enter into any new state as if to achieve some higher purpose. Nor in the life of God can he be existing fully happy with himself, fully pleased with Jesus Christ, or with the performance and the fulfillment of his decrees, and then all of a sudden like have a part of his being or joy or contentment or self-sufficiency slip away from him. But he is, like, we have these moments where we gain and lose and whatever, but God has no moments where he's gaining, where he's the gainer in his being of anything, or the loser because things slip away of anything.
Okay.
We have our life measured out to us piece by piece. We go through a progression and a stage, a development, but God, that's not true.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
It's like we don't have our fullness of life right now because, well, now, not then.
Yeah.
like there's life we're experiencing right at this moment that yesterday we hadn't experienced yet. So we don't have this sort of fullness in the moment. Whereas like with God, every moment is that fullness or whatever.
Yeah. I was looking to see if I had more, and I don't have more still.
Page 103. Oh,
what's wrong? Did you fall asleep through the other parts?
Whatever, Mr. I. My last one was on page 70.
You weren't supposed to mention that.
Okay, you see the quote on here? Pronounce that guy's last name.
Dogmatic?
Well, what is
no,
this?
sorry.
Hold on. Oh, my mom's calling. Sorry, Mom. Making a YouTube video.
Herman Bavinck? Are you talking about that one, or show me which one you're talking about?
Yes. I just wanted you to say Bavinck.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I've got people wanting to talk to me and everything. It's so exciting. Okay. Really, I was buying time so I could get a drink of water.
That's fine by me.
So
I took a drink of water while you were...
Oh.
looking at your phone.
Okay. And so this, on page 103, Eternal Creator. This is Bavinck's summary of the doctrine of God being eternally creator. Eternal creator.
Make everybody wait.
From Reformed Dogmatics. The 4-volume set that apparently all the cool kids read.
And so you can't have it right now.
I'm reading part of it right now. What do you think about that?
Does it make you feel good?
On the one hand, it is certain that God is the eternal one, In him there is neither past or future, neither becoming or change. All that he is eternal. His thought, his will, his decree. Eternal in him is the idea of the world that he thinks and utters in the Son. Eternal in him is also the decision to create the world. Eternal in him is the will that created the world in time. Eternal is also the act of creating as an act of God, an action both internal and immanent. For God did not become creator, so that first for a long time he did not create, and then afterward he did create. Rather, he is the eternal creator. And as creator, he was the eternal one. And as the eternal one, he created. The creation, therefore, brought about no change in God. And I think in the argument of like being and becoming and whatnot, to me, the argument of God making something certainly does appear like God experienced a change or whatever. And so when you say things like, as the eternal one, he created, that's, I guess, a helpful way to say it, I guess. Mm-hmm. But this is, I think this is where the scriptures lead you to saying things like this in order to explain, I guess, really how God is. Because we have all these scriptures about he doesn't change, he's not a man, he is a spirit, he has fullness of life, and so we have to stand there and say he is eternal, he is the eternal creator. And though creation is something that's temporal, God is not a temporal being.
Yeah, it helps get rid of the disconnect of us thinking of that as causing him to be temporarily a creator.
Yeah, sure. Or becoming a creator because he made something, as if the creation made him to be something he wasn't before.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, this is on the limits of my understanding. Page 130 is my next one.
I won't make any comments as to how many
Yes, indeed. This is page 130, where to start with theology proper. Where to start with theology proper. ... Unity. So let's see what that's all about. Page 130. And it's the second sentence of the first actual paragraph. It says, the recent trend has been to begin with a study of the Trinitarian relations and persons and then proceed to a consideration of the divine nature. But as Ortlund shows, without first grasping certain truths about the divine existence and essence, most importantly, divine simplicity, there is no guarantee that one's doctrine of the Trinitarian relations and persons will be necessarily monotheistic. This is a good point. In fact, it's hard to see why one's account of God's threefold relations would be monotheistic if one were not already committed to the simplicity of the divine being. He's saying, if we first talk about the Trinity and then talk about who God is essentially in his essence, then we're gonna probably end up with affirming three persons who are one person, which is obviously doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. But if we start, and this is why he's arguing with, he wants us to start in theology proper with God's existence and essence, and from there work out to three divine persons existing in this one essence, then we'll be okay. We'll stay monotheistic.
Oh, okay.
If we start with unity and then go a unity of essence and work from there to three persons, well, we've got one God, one essential unity that is three persons.
Mm-hmm.
But if we start with the three persons, how are we going to work back to one divine essence? Like if in our reasoning process, I'm saying, if we start in our reasoning process with affirming God is three persons, how are we ever going to work backwards to getting to one essential unity? It's backwards. So he's saying we start with unity, and that's how you can only rightly argue for the doctrine of the Trinity. Without ending up with three gods or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all I've got.
That's all I've got too.
Anything else for you, big guy?
No, nothing else.
Okay, well, this concludes our book day. I hope that it was helpful to you. And if you have any questions, or if we got something wrong, or if you want to comment, to ask a question or something, if we don't know the answer, I'm sure somebody else down there will. So with that, I'll see you in the next one, and I wish you well.